Yeah, the doctors said brain dead, and the family took that as dead, gone, out of here.
Dunbar.
Hello everybody and welcome to Gene's Reviews. Reviews from a regular dude. Where I do trailer reactions, I react to YouTube videos, I review YouTube channels, occasionally I'll review a movie, but really, I just do whatever the hell I want.
Hello everybody and welcome to Gene's Reviews. Reviews from a regular dude. Today we're going to do one from World List. This is a channel that I did first like a couple weeks ago. I really like this channel. But this is 10 people who woke up after being declared dead. 10 people who woke up after being declared dead. That's been one of my fears, kind of. Could you imagine that? Being in the... ready to get your blood drained and embalmed, and you wake up.
Hey guys, it's Chris. From a woman who woke up in the cemetery after being falsely pronounced dead, to the horrifying story of the woman who died and went to heaven before crashing back down to earth. Here are 10 of the craziest times people woke up after being declared dead. Number 10. Yasmin Banu. A woman was declared dead, but then she woke up in a cemetery. Wait, what? Yes. As it turns out, the whole thing was one bizarre case of miscommunication. It happened in India to a woman named Yasmin Banu, who fainted in her house and was then rushed to hospital by her brother. The doctors examined her, suggested she get emergency surgery, but then couldn't treat her because they didn't have enough beds. She was sent to a private hospital to get the surgery done, but before they could, the hospital realized she was brain dead. Well, at least they thought she was brain dead. The hospital told her family to take her home, but instead her family took her to the cemetery to be buried because they thought she was 100% deceased. But then something strange happened. You see, right before her body was lifted to perform the last rites ceremony, she started breathing. It turned out she was alive and her family had made a grave error, no pun intended. Once Yasmin woke up, she was given water and then sent back to the private hospital, where she had emergency surgery performed to fix a blood clot in her brain. She was never dead at all, and the hospital confirmed that they'd never said she was physically dead, only brain dead. I mean, it would be hilarious if it wasn't so gravely terrifying, but I'm just glad she's okay. This time it was a miscommunication with the family that almost had Yasmin buried alive. Number 9. Essie.
Yeah, the doctors said brain dead, and the family took that as dead, gone, out of here.
Dunbar. In the year 1915, Essie Dunbar was pronounced dead after she suffered from a seizure. According to the local legends, she was even discovered still alive halfway through her burial, with Essie already stuffed into her coffin. This happened in South Carolina, when Essie was found to have no signs of life and was declared dead. Her corpse was put into a wooden coffin. The funeral was arranged for the next morning. And during the cemetery, her coffin was lowered 6 feet deep, but her sister hadn't made it to the original service. So when her sister did finally show up, she asked to see the body before the dirt was thrown onto the coffin. They brought the coffin back up, they took out the screws, opened the lid, and found Essie very much alive. It was such a shock that one of the ministers fell forward into the grave and apparently broke 3 of his ribs. Those attending the funeral thought Essie was a ghost and ran away screaming. Considering this was 1915, Essie had to go through the rest of her life with her neighbors thinking she was a zombie, when in fact she had just suffered an epileptic seizure and the doctors of the day didn't know what to do about it, so they tried to bury her alive.
Back in 1915.
Being buried alive was much more common in the days before we had more advanced medical machinery to detect what goes on inside the human body. Thankfully, it's not likely to happen to anyone in our modern world, so you can rest easy knowing you won't be laid to rest before your time. Number 8.
And if her sister wouldn't have asked to see the body, she would have been buried alive and she would have suffocated. For sure.
Cantala Gaya. A woman infected with COVID-19 was pronounced dead at 76 years old, but something strange happened after. Her family was devastated. They took her to a crematorium to be burned, and just minutes before the flames turned her into a pile of ashes, she woke up still alive. The trouble had started several days earlier when Cantala Gaya tested positive for COVID-19. She was in home isolation. But because she was so old, her symptoms became severe, and she needed to be taken to the hospital in an ambulance. The hospital struggled to find a proper bed for her. She fell unconscious and wouldn't wake back up, and the doctors simply wrote her off and said she was dead. Unfortunately, in rural India, there aren't the same types of advanced medical equipment that exist in the more developed nations to detect if someone is in a coma or dead. So her family took her back to her village in India. They arranged for a funeral pyre to cremate Shakuntala. But just before they threw her into the flames, she opened her eyes and started to cry. She was rushed to the hospital immediately to receive the treatment that she should have gotten in the first place.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder how many people were actually alive when they were declared dead but didn't wake up in time. That would be one of the worst ways to go. There's no doubt about that. And the thought of it really creeps me out. Number 7, Anna Hawkwald. Anna Hawkwald lived in Dayton, Ohio back in 1884. It was around 6 o'clock in the morning on January 10th, the day of her brother's wedding, when she was found dead, slumped in a chair with her head resting against the wall. The wedding went on anyway without her, and Anna was declared dead from extreme heart palpitations. Apparently, Anna had a pretty nervous demeanor, so it wasn't really a big surprise to anyone. Anna was then buried at the nearby cemetery. But her friends had a weird feeling in their guts. They didn't think Anna was actually dead, as they said that during the funeral service, she wasn't as pale as she should have been. After begging her parents, they finally agreed to have Anna disinterred. What they found is shocking and disturbing. Yes, she was alive. Well, at least she was before she was buried. Anna was turned on her side with her fingers chewed down to the bone and her hair yanked out of her skull. It turned out that they had buried her alive after falsely proclaiming her dead, and Anna had pulled out all her hair as she screamed and suffocated in the ground. Number 6, Tina.
See, now there's my nightmare right there.
A woman named Tina was declared dead for real. Her heart had stopped, and in an earlier era, she would have been buried and well and truly gone. She was, for all intents and purposes, no longer of this world. She was dead for 27 minutes before the doctors were able to bring her back to life. The first responders had her on a defibrillator machine that somehow, beyond their expectations, brought her back from the realm of the dead. When Tina woke up, the first thing she asked was for a pen. She then wrote on a piece of paper, "It's real." When the people in the room asked what she was talking about, she pointed up to the ceiling and began to cry. Later on, when Tina could finally speak again, she said that when she died, she saw heaven. She doesn't know why she was brought back to life after literally dying, but that's just how it went. She's now trying to spread the message that God is real and so is heaven. However, it's 100% possible that she dreamed, hallucinated, or simply imagined it. After all, she was dead for nearly half an hour. So what do you think? Is this just a case of powerful mental chemicals that were released by her brain as she fluttered between life and death? Tell me your thoughts in the comments down.
Well, if she was dead for nearly a half an hour, they say you can't go that long without oxygen. So, heaven. I believe she saw heaven. I don't believe it was a dream or any of that stuff. They always try and write it off as that. I believe it.
Down below. And if you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe to World List if this video intrigues you.
There has to be some reason
Kevin Santos was
went
2
30
years
minutes.
old when he was pronounced dead. He was also 2 years old when he sat up inside his coffin during his own funeral and asked his father if he could have a drink of water. According to the Huffington Post, the child then laid back in the coffin, closed his eyes, and continued to be dead. It all started when Kevin stopped breathing because of complications with his bronchial pneumonia. This happened in the Brazilian city of Belém. While the child was waiting to be released into the custody of his family, he was put into an airtight body bag and left there for 3 hours. He would have had no air to breathe. Yet later that day, when the funeral service was going on, the kid sat up, asked if he could have a drink, and then fell back dead and could not be revived. It wasn't just witnessed by the family either. The miracle was witnessed by everyone in attendance. The boy was rushed back to the hospital, but doctors were stumped. They said he was definitely dead and that there was no way he got up, and definitely no way he could have asked for something. Much to the dismay of the family, they then had to have the funeral all over again. Is it possible that there was a collective delusion going on here? Or something more sinister or supernatural? The whole situation leaves us with more questions than answers.
Yeah,
Number 4,
that's
Lewis
terribly
Roberts.
sad.
Lewis Roberts was hit by a van at 18 years old. The impact was so brutal that when Lewis was taken to the hospital, he was declared brain dead with no possibility of ever recovering. which is basically the same thing as being fully dead. His organs were to be donated. But just hours before the surgeons cut him open and began taking out his valuable internal organs to hand off to other people, he woke up and started to blink. The doctors were shocked. They'd given him a 0% chance of survival. The doctors had also taken him off the life support machines. Yet despite this, Lewis began breathing on his own without them. Following his amazing recovery, Lewis began returning to normal. Doctors called it a miracle and said it was lucky that he started breathing when he did. Otherwise, all his important organs would currently be inside other people. Number 3.
Wow.
Mr. Bala Subramaniam. Mr. Bala Subramaniam was declared dead on a Monday and his body stuffed into a freezer to await collection by the undertaker. Nobody knew what was wrong with the man. He was simply dead. He was also 74 years old, so it could have really been anything. According to the report from the BBC, when the undertaker finally arrived on Sunday to collect his body, he had somehow come back to life. But what's really strange is that nobody took any responsibility for the mistake. The doctors won't even speculate as to how he managed to survive the freezing temperatures of the freezer or how he wasn't dead in the first place. The man was rescued from the freezer and taken to a different hospital where new doctors could take a look at him.
Good.
But by Friday, he lost the battle a second time and was really actually dead. This time, he stayed dead too. It seems like something weird happened here, but reports just aren't conclusive. Perhaps he had some type of strange brain injury. We just don't know. Number 2, Peter Kygan. The case of Peter Kygan is one of medical negligence. Peter was a Kenyan man who woke up in the morgue while the morticians were literally about to embalm him. They had him jammed with needles connecting to tubes and were preparing to drain the blood from his body. At 32 years old, Peter regained consciousness and began to scream. No kidding. He screamed because one of the morgue staff was in the middle of slicing open his leg.
Yeah,
how did Peter wind up in the morgue in the first place?
That'd make you
scream.
scream.
He was suffering from a tummy ache and was taken to the hospital by his family. The doctors pronounced Peter dead, and his body was transferred to the morgue, and he woke up shortly after. Everyone involved was shocked, but Peter was the most surprised of them all. He had no idea where he was when he woke up, though he did tell local news that he was happy his life was spared. In this case, Peter went on living, and so far as we know, he's still alive today. Number 1, Miss Virginia. Barbara Guthrie Lay was pronounced dead in 2020 on December 22nd. Minutes later, she rose from the dead in a fog of confusion. Barbara was 82 years old when this happened, a former Miss Virginia currently residing in Roswell, Georgia. She had contracted COVID-19 from her neighbor next door and had to be taken to the hospital because she could hardly breathe. 2 days after being in the hospital, she was pronounced dead. The hospital called her husband to give him the bad news, and he was then forced to make the dreadful phone call to the family and friends. But after having to make the hardest phone calls of his life, Barbara's husband then received a call that his wife was still alive. According to the hospital, nobody's really sure how it all happened. Barbara isn't sure how it happened either. One second she was dead, the next she was alive. And now that Barbara has fully recovered, she says she's looking forward to living to be at least 101. That way she and her husband can celebrate their 25th wedding anniversary together. At least this story has a happy ending. Do you know anyone who was declared dead but woke up later?
That's crazy. 10 people who woke up after being declared dead. Let's see. I may have told this joke before, but if I did, it was a long time ago. So I'm going to do it again. I went to a club. The doorman said it's $15 or 20, and that includes a meal. I paid 20, walked in, and this naked guy with oil all over him says, "Hi, my name's Emil."
Thank you, everybody. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, hashtag Mean Gene, all that fun stuff. And if you like this video, tell all your friends, leave a comment down below. And if you didn't like it, then just shut up. And I will see you next time.